Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going deep into the heart of South Philadelphia,
Oh,
a world I think a lot of us only see from the outside looking in.
yeah.
And we'll be exploring a document simply titled Untitled Document.
Interesting.
It's a first-hand account from a man named Trey Brown about what it was like to grow up surrounded by poverty and violence.
Heavy stuff.
You'll hear about the challenges he faced, the people who shaped him, and ultimately how he found his own path to resilience. So,
Ready.
yeah, let's dive in. Trey's story really is powerful, and
He is.
and it's important to remember that, while his experiences are unique to him, they also reflect the realities of so many people
Right.
who grew up in similar circumstances.
Absolutely.
And it all starts in the projects of South Philadelphia.
Okay.
Tree paints this really stark picture of his early years, surrounded by drug addiction and crime, where despair almost felt like the norm. But even in that environment, he talks about these glimmers of hope,
Oh, that's good.
like his godparents, Mr. Billmore and Miss Jackie.
I see.
These positive role models were absolutely crucial for Trey, especially considering the fact that his father wasn't around.
Right.
Mr. Billmore especially became this, father figure that Trey could look up to, a source of stability and guidance in a world that often felt very chaotic.
A world that was chaotic.
And it wasn't just their presence, it was the experiences they provided him with
Nice.
that made a difference.
Yeah.
There's this moment where Trey talks about a trip Mr. Billmore took him on when he was just 3 years old to an amusement park.
Wow.
It was his first time ever leaving the projects.
Think about that.
Can you imagine being 3 years old and never having seen anything beyond your own neighborhood?
It's hard to even fathom.
Yeah, and think about what that does to a child's understanding of the world.
Yeah.
When your whole life is confined to a few blocks, it can really limit your sense of what's possible.
It really can.
We call this limited horizons, and it's a major challenge for kids in poverty.
It makes sense.
That trip to the amusement park was more than just a fun day out for Trey.
Oh,
It literally expanded his horizons, showing him there was a whole world out there beyond the project.
Beyond the world he knew.
But those brighter moments in Trey's childhood were often overshadowed by the harsh realities of his surroundings.
Unfortunately, yeah.
He describes this one particularly violent night in the projects that sent him into shock, actually requiring hospitalization. It's important to pause here and consider the long-term effects of something like that.
Absolutely.
Witnessing such intense violence, especially at such a young age, can be incredibly traumatic.
Right.
It can lead to things like PTSD, and it can shape how a person sees the world.
And how they interact with others, yeah.
And interacts with others later in life.
For sure.
And it makes you wonder how much of Trey's later experiences might be linked back to that event.
I was just thinking that.
And it brings us to a turning point in his story when he's 5 years old.
Okay.
His family moves to Southwest Philadelphia.
Okay, a change of scenery.
You'd think a change of scenery would mean a fresh start.
Yeah, you would hope so.
But
not always.
it's not always that simple, is it?
No, it's not.
Systemic issues like poverty and lack of opportunity
Right.
don't just disappear because you move to a new neighborhood.
They don't magically go away.
So in a way, it's like trading one set of obstacles for another.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And for Trey, those obstacles included the devastating loss of friends to gun violence.
Oh, wow.
By the time he's 14, 2 of his close friends had been killed.
That's so young.
That's a heavy burden for anyone to carry,
Unbearable.
let alone a teenager.
It really is.
Imagine the impact that has on a young person's psyche.
Yeah.
Growing up surrounded by violence like that, it can almost become normalized.
Right, like it's just a part of life.
A part of everyday life.
It's scary to think about.
But that doesn't mean it's not traumatic.
No, of course not.
It can erode trust.
Yeah.
Create a constant sense of fear. And make it difficult to envision a future free from violence.
The future without that fear, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
As Trey enters his teenage years, we really start to see how those early experiences with poverty and violence shape his choices.
Makes sense.
He talks about feeling this pressure to fit in, to keep up with peers who have, more money,
Right.
more stuff, more clothes, more everything.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see how someone in that position might be lured in by the quick cash of selling drugs.
Absolutely.
But it's important to remember, I think, for many teens in these situations,
Yeah.
Those choices, however risky they are, often stem from a place of need.
Of course.
They're not just looking for money.
Right.
They're looking for a sense of belonging,
Yep.
a sense of control in a world that often feels chaotic and unfair.
Exactly.
Trey was caught in this bind. He needed money,
Yeah.
and selling drugs seemed like the only way to get it.
Right.
But even in his words, you can hear this, the guilt, this feeling that this isn't who he really is.
Yes.
How common is this kind of internal conflict for kids in Trey's situation?
It's incredibly common, actually. These young people are often aware of the dangers
Right.
and the consequences of their actions,
Uh-huh.
but they feel trapped by their circumstances.
Right.
They see few other options.
Yeah.
Few legitimate pathways to achieve the things that they desire.
And then there's this turning point when Trey discovers music.
Music, okay.
He describes it as a lifeline,
Interesting.
a way to channel his emotions,
Yeah.
a way to connect with others who share his passion.
I see.
Music becomes this outlet
Right.
for him, a way to express himself and to process these experiences in a healthy way.
Right, and it's not just about escaping reality.
Right.
It's about finding meaning and purpose
then-
in the midst of it all.
And he even suggests that music might have literally saved his life,
Wow.
keeping him occupied and off the streets during those critical years when so many of his friends were lost to violence.
It makes you think about all the things that people find that help them through
Mm.
those times in their lives.
And for Trey, music wasn't just this solitary pursuit.
Right.
It also brought him into a community,
Yeah.
a group of people who understood him and shared his passion.
That sense of belonging is so important,
It's so powerful.
especially for someone who's felt like an outsider.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just music that helped guide him. Trey talks a lot about his mother, her unwavering encouragement for him to stay in school
Oh, wow.
and to pursue a different kind of life.
His mother's belief in him,
Yeah.
even when he doubted himself, was a driving force.
Absolutely.
Shows the impact a parent can have,
Yeah.
even amidst incredibly difficult circumstances.
It's this beautiful reminder that even when surrounded by negativity, the support of family can be this anchor, this source of strength and resilience.
Absolutely.
As we move to the present day, we see that Trey is now a husband and a father himself.
Okay.
He's working hard to provide for his family, to give them the opportunities that he never had.
Good for him.
But when he looks back on his past, there's this mix of emotions.
Understandably so.
Sadness, regret, but also gratitude for having survived.
It's interesting he says that.
There's this sense of survivor's guilt that comes through in his reflection.
Yeah.
He's aware that many of his friends didn't make it out of that cycle
Right.
of poverty and violence.
Yeah.
He carries that weight,
Yeah.
the weight of their loss and the constant questioning of why he survived when they didn't.
That's got to be tough.
But even with that weight on his shoulders, Trey also expresses this profound sense of hope for the future,
It's great.
especially for his own children. He's determined to break the cycle,
Yeah.
to give them a different life.
And that's where we really see resilience.
Yeah.
Not just surviving,
Right.
but thriving.
Exactly.
It's about learning from the past, acknowledging the pain,
Yeah.
and using those experiences to create a better future.
Trey's story is so powerful and moving, but it's also made me think about all the factors that led him to this point.
Yeah.
How much of his journey was shaped by his own choices, and how much was influenced by the systems he was born into?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It really is.
While Trey undoubtedly made choices that shaped his path, we can't ignore the systemic issues that really created the context for those choices.
So we're talking about things like generational poverty,
Of course.
limited access to education and jobs,
Mhm.
and just the constant presence of violence in the community.
Absolutely.
So even if he had made different choices along the way, the odds were stacked against him.
In a lot of ways, yeah. Imagine growing up in an environment where drug addiction and crime are just normal,
Right.
where good role models are hard to come by,
Yeah.
and where simply leaving your neighborhood feels like this huge accomplishment.
Right.
These are the realities for a lot of people.
It's hard to hear.
And it's important for us to understand how these systemic factors contribute to the cycles of poverty and violence
Yeah.
that are so difficult to break.
It's a lot to take in and makes you feel kind of helpless.
It does.
What can we as individuals even do to make a difference?
It's easy to feel that way, I think. But I do believe even small actions
Yeah.
can make a difference. It starts with awareness,
Okay.
educating ourselves
Yeah.
about these realities of poverty
Right.
and the systems in place that perpetuate it.
And then we can start to look for ways to support organizations
Exactly.
that are working to address these issues.
Like groups that provide mentorship for kids,
Right, or work to improve educational opportunities in these communities.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of just talking about these issues with
Hmm.
friends and family,
Yeah,
raising awareness,
right.
challenging biases, and advocating for policy changes that promote economic and social justice.
Those are all good steps.
They really are.
Trey's story shows the resilience of the human spirit,
It really does.
but it highlights the need for change.
Yeah.
It's not enough to pull ourselves up by our
I
bootstraps.
think
We have to create a world where everyone has a fair chance.
exactly.
It's not about blame or shame. It's about understanding the bigger picture
Yeah.
and working together.
To make things better
Trey's story makes us confront uncomfortable truths
about the world.
and asks us what we're willing to do to change things.
What are we willing to do to help create communities where every child has the opportunity to thrive?
That's the question.
This has been a heavy but insightful deep dive.
It has.
Thanks for joining us today as we explored these complexities of poverty, violence, and this enduring power of the human spirit.
Thank you for having me.
We hope Trey's story has inspired you to think critically about the world around us and to consider how you can make a difference in your own way.
Let's all strive to create a world where stories like Trey's become less about survival and more about the possibilities when we invest in everyone.
Thanks for listening.